Good morning, everybody. Let's one of the things that's been going on and we've been talking about is using the class methods to do your development with WinDev, WebDev. Doesn't really matter which one. Both of them use the same thing. First question obviously says, well, why should I use that versus the direct connection to Hyperfile? If you're going to use just a one person install local Hyperfile classic files, it really doesn't matter which way you go. Okay, I don't see that anything from a local file definitions is going to give you any direct advantage by using the classes versus not using the classes. There are advantages to using classes due to code reuse and the ability to minimize and use the same functionality through multiple projects. In other words, I can share the class with my WinDev desktop, WebDev desktop, both, and the reactions to the displayed information is going to be the same. I can also put functional code in methods within a class, and it too will work the same on whether WebDev or WinDev, so it doesn't make any difference between the two. The same thing applies to mobile with some slight changes because there's some differences between an Android and iOS and Windows that you can have some changes in the class methodology because of that. But if you're looking at developing a system that is either going to use Hyperfile SQL with multiple people, MS SQL, Postgres, MySQL, these different flavors of SQL that you may be used to for Windows development or web development, now's where the classes start coming into more of a methodology that's going to benefit you versus not benefit you. If you come from a C# background or maybe any .NET background, then you're already used to working with data sources and utilizing those to show data on the screen, forms, and things like this. So that will be a transition that would be easier for you versus the direct normal development. So the thing that I'm trying to lay out here is that a lot of it depends on what you want to build. Most of our products that we deal with are MS SQL, Postgres type systems. So they're much larger, got more than 50 to 150 people using it. They're data intensive. They're large amounts of data, things like this, and the things that you want to eliminate out of that is potential issues. Some of the potential issues, let's just talk MS SQL as a example. MS SQL has been around for a while. I've used it for quite some time once I got into the latest versions, 2001, 2002 versions past those. The thing about MS SQL is they have an ability to lock the entire table. And the way that happens is that when you do a select statement to get data and you decide that you're going to get the entire table, depending upon your select statement, you can do a cascading lock to where basically you've got the whole table locked to you and everybody else is waiting for you to finish first. In doing a direct access through a table, you can run into that problem by locking a record that you really don't need to lock. We've solved that problem, or we feel that our methodologies is better to do this this way versus those lockings, because in essence what we do is instead of using queries and things like this that can write a not as an efficient system, plus we use table functions, we use stored procedures in the database. There's these things that there's not necessarily a way for the regular development to be able to access. Using the classes, we can literally create our own SQL statement, tuned the way we want to have it tuned, and get the data faster. We can use functionality like the no lock to eliminate the possibility of locking any records when we do a select statement, things like this. And we go on from there. Postgres is a whole different egg. It doesn't have a locking issue. And we use that mainly for mobile development, things like this. And it is very fast if you deal with it where you're being able to work your select statements and work your tuning of your select statements. So the entire classes we've built, which is the WxManager class here, if you've downloaded our repository for version 24 or went ahead and gotten the repository from our shared SCM that you can access, which I did a video on it not too long ago, a couple of weeks ago, I believe, in order to access that, it does come with the WxManager class. Now, you're saying, well, how, do I use H commands, things like that? Yes, that's exactly what this does. But what happens in this class is that using the great tools that that PC Software provided with indirection and things like this, we've been able to take all of the functionality you would normally have to code by hand, add, change, delete, go get a single record, children processing, all of this items, we've been able to put into a single class that you can include with what we call a management class of the table, and it gives you all of the functionality that you need to be able to operate. So it makes your development of tables, it makes your development of forms and things like this much faster and easier to deal with. Okay? So that's what we're going to kind of go over today. Now, I've already created this application. Let me tell you where we're going to go with this application. This is going to be a multi-phased type application. Number one, we're just going to build a little local program with a simple table and a form in order to update a customer name. The next phase of this is we're going to turn around and convert it to where we're going to convert the analysis to a SQL database. We're going to change it from Hyperfile Classic to Postgres because I've got it out there on the cloud and anybody can touch it, so we're fine with being able to use that and using one of the test databases we have out there. And when we do that, then we're going to start looking at more of a complex functionality with multiple tables, merging and interjoining multiple tables, things like this. So we'll be going through creating all of these different functions. We'll create a function in Postgres and use the SQL to call it and have it do its thing. So we're going to be doing quite a bit over this period of time. If there are anything particular that you're looking to want to do, feel free to go on our Facebook, which is that we have WinDev-US is our Facebook page. We've got over 600, 700, 800 members up there right now. I've lost count. And post it up there for us to look at, and I'll put it on the list of to-do things, okay? And that allow us to kind of tune our training or tune what we know that we want to impart upon you, knowledge of how to do different things. And if you've got some feedback to saying, yeah, you did it this way, but you could do it that way, we want to know that too. Okay, we really want to know that too, and the reason why we really want to know that is that even though that we've done a lot in 5-6 years with WinDev, more than I ever thought I could do, we certainly don't know everything. We certainly don't know everything, but we have tried quite a few different things. So please put your feedback in. If you feel that we're going down the wrong path or got a little bit better path to go down, we'll certainly research it and look at it and see whether or not that it is actually more beneficial. Okay? And if it's not, or even if it is, we'll have another little session. We'll discuss the item. We'll show the different ways to do it and say, okay, this one is better versus this one, or they're both the same. It is whatever your preference is. Okay, so let's go from there. In our analysis on this project, we have a single file, just customer. This is all it is. The customer has a name, address, city, state, and zip code. Okay, we're not going to be overly impressive on this application. It is supposed to be simple. The reason why is because it allows you to have a very, very simple viewpoint of how to develop this code. The other thing that we do in here is we have control templates. Control templates is a very, very nice feature that WinDev has. In other words, it is like a super control with code that you can save constantly. So we've created a save cancel and an add change and delete. This is to be able to run the table and being able to save on a form, save and cancel on a form. Each one of these, and I'll show it to you, has already the buttons on there. I've got add, change, delete, and copy. If you don't need the copy, it's already hidden right now. You don't need to worry about it. What it does do is automatically, depending upon what you're trying to do, will either add, change, or delete the code or delete the record. You have the ability to change things on it just before the add, look at things right after the add, as well as what it will do is turn around and give you the ability to manage the table if it's you know, after you've added a record or removed a record. And let me kind of show you how that is. If we look at a insert record, which is add record here, you can see that what we're doing here is we're using values from a set of variables that we set when we add these to it, as well as indirection on this. This is, you know, and the reason behind this is because we now can use the indirection or use the functionality to be able to manage the record that you're trying to add or delete or change, okay? And this is what we're doing. We've also preset it up to where you can actually open up multiple forms with multiple records, so you can allow a user that is saying using multiple orders. They can highlight 3 orders, open up 3 different order forms, and they've got the records to manage and do it with. My suggestion is don't let them go past 5. Most people cannot handle more than 3 to 5 open at one time. So either make it a user-based deal if you're going to do that, which is fine, or just don't allow them to do it. The idea is not to cause yourself additional problems from people calling you saying, well, I had this record up and it changed 4 times by itself. Well, yeah, you had it up 4 different times. So there's certain things you can do. But anyway, the indirection portion, which is what we're using here, is saying that we're going to send it to the file, we're going to send it the record, and we're going to tell the form what we're going to do. Up here, we're just using the label name in order to create a string of what we need to do, which is a variable reset of the class and setting the action type to it, and then we execute that code. Okay? All of this is pre-done. You really don't have to change anything in this code. If there is something to change, go ahead and do it, but make yourself a test screen and step it through so you can see exactly what it's doing first. Okay? And as we move forward with this this training project here that's going to be available up in our shared system, shared SCM, is that as we finish each section, when I start the next one, I'm going to make a branch of each one of them. So that way you can go back and see start, second part, third part, fourth part, all the way down. You'll be able to see why we do things like this and have these set up, and the advanced functionality that we can do in our post and pre-CRUD functionality with tables and stuff. Additionally, you got the same thing on the save and cancel. You got a post-save procedure, pre-save, and a save procedure, and the save procedure is really pretty simple. Okay. Basically, it is all it's doing is doing a rec save, and I'll show you how that code works as well. But it does it for you, so I don't have to do anything. Both of these controls do what it's meant to do without me having to deal with anything, which is great. The idea of any development cycle is write the code once and use it a lot of times. Use it many times, so that way you don't have to rewrite the code on every project you do. Because if you have to write the code on every project you're doing, well, number one, you're wasting time. You could be much faster in your development process. Plus, you can spend more time in the design portion rather than the coding portion. And I've never been impressed with anybody who says, well, I got 1 million lines of code in this project. Okay, I'm happy for you. Okay. You're going to have big projects. I've got some that are in the 200,000 range of lines of code that I've written. So it's not it really depends on doing what you're doing. The other part in this is if you get into MySQL, Postgres, and MS SQL, you need to balance your code that you're utilizing within the program with what you need to build in triggers and stored procedures inside the database. And if you've already been used to MySQL, MS SQL, and Postgres, you understand what the stored procedures, functions, and things that you can build in each one of those can do. And so you need to make sure that you're using what we call our referential integrity, which basically says this is exactly what this record should do every time, no questions asked. 90% of the time you write that in WinDev. I'm saying look at making it a stored procedure or something so it is automatically or a full rollback if it doesn't work. And we'll get into that later on too when we get into Postgres and MS SQL type development. So let's get things started. Now the first thing that we have to do is we have to build 2 classes that we've got to use. These classes, one is a record class, and what the record class does is it holds one record, only one. And that's how you manage that one record as you make changes to it. So what we're going to do here is we can come right down in our project and generate a model class. This will give us this class right here, which is now it's saying, okay, I have mapped you to your analysis. We don't use the mapping right at the moment. I'm experimenting with it to see exactly what all we can do with it. But until that time, we don't use it. So we hold down the Command key in Windows, and we can delete all of these extra items that we don't need fairly quickly. Okay? And delete the M's. Once we're done with that, what are we going to do? Well, I'm going to go ahead and use one of our new features in 25, and that is the Control R. And what the Control R is going to do is line everything back up instantly. This is a cool feature. Don't care what anybody says, I like this one. Especially if you get into a lot of code like we do, and lining things up. As Pete has said, that I'm a little anal retentive on lining things up so I can read it easier. It's all a readability issue. And I will fuss and make them go back and line up the code if they don't do it. because we need to be able to see this. We need to be able to understand everything with it. Once this is done, unless I've got to add some additional items to this, I don't need to do anything else. Okay, I can go ahead and save this. And once it's saved, I'm going to rename it so that way it gets rid of the M in front of the customer as well. And now I have a customer class. Okay, I have the customer class. The next thing we need to do is we need to make a class that manages these records. Inside the SCM and everything, there are several deals, and one of them is our code bricks, or code snippets now is what it's called. If you do not have these and cannot find them, please email me, Andy@Wxperts.com, or leave me a note or something up there on Facebook, and I will get you the link. Basically, what happens if you don't know how to do this is you can go to the home, go to options, go to the general options of WinDev, and underneath the directories, you'll see code snippets here, and that'll tell you where those are. And all you do is unzip the ones we have and replace the code bricks that are already there, and voila, you now have all of these that are fully tested and done. And there are certain things that it does. And we're going to go through them as we build this project anyway. Okay, so let's kind of go and take a look at what we need to do next. Next thing we need to do is we need to make another class. This is going to manage the customer class. So we're going to create a class. We're going to call it Customer Manager. And that's going to open up this new class. Now, there's nothing in it at the moment. We don't know what's what, but here's where the code bricks come in, the code snippets come in. I look down here, and I have a couple of things that we need to do. We got the FM is what we're looking for, which is the File Manager Constructor and the File Manager Definition. I'm going to take the File Manager Definition, drag it out there, and just drop it on the top. And what it's going to do is say, what's my file class? Well, that's customer. We already know that. Okay. Now, what's happened is we now inherit from WxManager class. What this means is basically I'm going to include everything that the WxManager class is into this class, so I can use it. And you can see what's happened is every one of the functions, members, and everything dealing with that class is now available for me to utilize, or what they call overload, things like that if I wanted to. We'll do some overloading later on. I'll show you how that's done. This next thing we need to do is tell in the constructor what we're working with. Okay, so we take the constructor and we drop it in here. Again, we got the same thing. What's the file name? That's going to be customer. Do we need an alias file name? No. What an alias is if I really wanted to do it, I put double quotes CUST. So now everything is CUST dot name, CUST dot whatever it is. Okay? And the file class name you don't need to work with at all. That's some stuff that I'm working with later on. So now what we have is we've got a rec equals a new customer, when basically we're doing a reinstantiation of the customer class. The primary key field name is ID. We have a primary key on every table. Every table, I name it ID, period. The reason behind that is because since you're using either the file name, which is customer, or the alias as CUST, the .ID will always be the same. Now, if you're doing a parent-child, I'll show you how to solve that problem using the IDs, but you'll understand how this works, and I don't have to deal with anything. I know the ID is my primary key element. Okay, so we got both of these, and in essence, we're done with these now. We don't have to do anything more. That gives me the constructor, that gives me the management class, and that gives me the customer class. We're done. So I've got the two classes that I need to build this particular window. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go into the code and I'm going to say, okay, let's declare those two classes and use them. Now there's multiple places you can declare the classes. If you're going to have a class that is going to be used throughout the project, in other words, like a lookup table or something like this with definitions, then you can go back to the project code and declare it here. Okay? If not, declare it in the screen that you have it. Most of the time, that's the best way to do it. That way, what happens is when you close the screen, the data goes away and your memory's released. So what I'm going to do here now is I'm going to make the manager class, MGR manager, customer is customer manager, and a rec customer is customer. It didn't get changed here. Okay, we got to rename that. I thought I renamed it, but I guess it didn't want to. Let's try that again. Now, it's not a big deal if you leave it as mCustomer. It'll be fine, but you'll have to change it in the Customer Manager class if you do that. So this is the better way to do it. So we got those two, and in essence, we need to now put the table on the screen. And what I'm doing on the table under the creation is I'm just putting a standard table on it. And when it pops up, it wants to know how you want to fill the table. Well, we're going to use an existing variable instead of anything else. And you'll see what immediately pops up. It shows me where I declared that manager customer and the rec customer. I'm going to go into the manager customer, and there's an array right here, AAR rec. This is an array of records. And what that is an array of the customer class. And what I want to do is I'm going to use that. Now, what am I going to display? Well, I'm going to display the name, address, city, state, and zip code. Get that state in there, zip code. And at the end, I'm going to put the ID. Now, we're going to change the ID when we get there, but I'll explain to you the reason why we want to put the ID in this. Inside the control template, one of the functionalities is if you add or change or delete a record, for an end user experience that's nice, you want to make sure that they select the correct record or they only move up one record and not start at the top again. Okay? So by putting the ID in here, if I just inserted a record, it automatically searches the table, finds the record, and puts the highlight line on that record. So now your user says, okay, that's the record I just inserted. If you have 5 records to delete, instead of highlighting one, deleting it, then going all the way to the top and searching for it again, highlighting and everything, it's just going to pop up one record at a time. So you're able then to delete multiple records one after another if you need to. Okay? Update, it's going to stay on that record. It's not going to refresh the entire screen and you lose which records you were currently working with. That's the reason behind it, because we've got code in there to handle that instead of having to rewrite it. Once that's done, boom, we now have the information. And here's the changes we make. When we right mouse click this thing, the only thing I'm going to change here is change this from that to column ID. And I'm just going to put COL in front of it. And I'm going to turn it off from being visible. I don't need it visible. The other thing that we need to do is down in the content. In the content, you see that source browsed is already the AAR rec of the manager customer. That's cool. That's already done. Here's the thing, the stored variable. In other words, when I select a record, when I select one of the rows in the table, what do I want to bring back to me as the stored variable? I want the entire thing. So if I highlight the top one and hit OK, it's going to bring me the entire record, not just one piece, not one field. I get the entire record. This is really the cool part about this, because I'll show you as this happens, as we work through it, what exactly happens this way. So we've added those. We set that customer record up. We set up the array record. We're done with both of those. And the only thing we got to do now is put something on here so we know we can add, change, and delete. And here's where we get into the control templates. We can put this over here. We get the control templates. You can name it whatever you want. I usually do it as control ACD for add, change, and delete. Gives me a simple naming convention. If there's multiple tables, then you basically control ACD, whatever table name, control ACD, the other table name, things like this. The next thing we have to do is fill out some things so this control knows what to work with. So when you hit the F2 on the control, there's a global declarations of control ACD that you're working with. Here we go back to the code snippets. And you'll find there is a ACD Wxperts version. What we want to do is drag that over and drop it on the screen. This is going to ask for a couple, 2 or 3 things. The table name. Unless you've changed that table name, that's exactly what it is. It's table AAR rec, period. We need to know the record class, which is going to be customer. Okay. And then we got the form, which is an ID. That's a little, leave that alone. And we go from there. We don't need the CRUD icon. And now what you have here is everything set up to be able to do this. Okay, so let's go through this. There are certain flags that you have there. Display table. This is what will go find the record. Set buttons, whether you want to set the buttons or not set the buttons, and I'll show you how to set those up. Whether you have a child table or not. Obviously, we don't have a child table at the moment. The table name. We want to get the table AAR rec and the full name of it. Okay. If you don't put the ... full name, it's going to give you an error. You got to put either double quotes around the table AAR rec or put the ... full name. We use the ... full name by default. We want the record class, which is going to be customer. And now we're checking to see whether the child table is there, or if not, we want the file class prefix. Now, the reason why we name it MGR customer and rec customer is because this record class here is going to be customer. So MGR customer now, okay, I'm using the management class for customers, and I'm assigning it to this variable so that way this set of procedures within this add, change, and delete control knows what we're working with. Same thing with the rec. We assign it. If you notice, I named everything ID, so I don't have to deal with this at all. The last thing is the form. The form is going to be FRM _ customer. That's what the form is we're going to build. You can edit these if you want to by just double-clicking on this to get the editor up. And if your naming conventions are different and you want them different, you can come in here and modify this code snippet to fit your naming conventions. Okay? This will make it helpful for you however you wish to do it. So there's nothing that you're going to get that you cannot modify if you so desire. If you modify it enough that it's totally different, don't ask me for questions because I'd have to look for it too. Okay? But this is how it goes. Now, the last thing is the equates. We set up equates for opening files, add, change, delete, things like this. So an equate add is 1, equate update is a 2, and equate delete is a 3. Equate modal tells me how we want to open the form window when we open it. That's going to be a 1 is what it is, and it just allows us to, instead of referencing a number, we can reference something that's readable and we know what it is. It's excellent. Constants is what they are. And we do that within one class we call equates, where we can set up as many different equates as we want You can see that we have a view equate, which is 5. We have all kinds of things in here that you can deal with, including characters for quote, commas, double quotes, things like this. If you're having to build things up, it allows you to set up a bunch of these. You can look it over, and if you have any questions, feel free to holler. Once we're done with this, now we're just ready. We are certainly ready to build the form. I mean, because we're done with this. If we have any names at all, we can hit the go button, and it will show it right now. Wait a minute. Okay. All right. I'm going to put you on pause for a second and get rid of a file. Okay, I'm back. My problem was I had redone this before just to make sure I knew my flow was going to be right, and I should have removed 2 files out of the directory before I restarted and started this procedure, so I had to go handle the situation. Okay, so let's get back here to what we're doing and try to run this thing again. Okay, so we're going to run it. We're going to do main. And we have no records, but we're ready to go. Okay? In order to select everything and know how everything works, we've got to step over one portion of this. You notice we have a connections here. Now, this is Hyperfile Classic. That's what we're using. But I've got a connection to it. And the reason why I got a connection to it is because I need to know how to get to it. I need to know where the files are located, things like this. So the connection variable is fairly straightforward. All it is saying it's a classic connection, multi-user single, and I want it in the application directory. No big major. The thing that you have to do also after doing this is you have to go into the project code and you need to define a connection variable. If you're using classic, then all you need is those 3 sets right there. DBCon is connection, server is localhost, and the provider is HF7. Done. Change the connection to everything in the analysis to that DBCon, change the directory, and do an H creation if not found. That way it creates the files. When we switch over to MS SQL or switch over to Postgres, you'll see what the differences are in this as we build it. Okay? The last thing we do is we're going to declare that the equate class is there with an EQU as equate class, and we're going to set the connection in the WxManager class. Now, the reason why we're doing this in the WxManager class at this level instead of in the instantiation of the manager customer is because any and all classes we declare that uses the WxManager class will use that connection as default. I don't have to define it every time I do something. This makes it much, much simpler and easier to do things. Okay? The other thing in the main is that obviously what we've done here, and I know there's other ways around this, we've set up that we got the manager customer and the rec customer, and now we actually got to pull the data. What I usually do is put in a init right here. There are people that will do it inside the table code, which you can certainly do. Things like this, I like keeping things in either routines and actual code snippets if I need them. So all I can do is put an init here, hit enter, and then I can go to the init. If it doesn't show up, I create it, but I already have it here. You can see what I've done already is put in the manager customer fetch data. And what that does is it gets the data from the record and then displays whatever those values are. Then when you hit the go button, we now are ready to go for the next phase of this, which is building the form. Okay? So let's take a look at building the form now. I'm going to create another new window, and this is going to be a blank window, straightforward. I'm going to take it, and I'm going to call this the form customer because that's what we called it in the ACD code. Make sure I don't have extra letters in here. All right, form customer is there. The thing that I've got to do, though, is you remember that in the ACD code, and let's go back to it. When I do an add record, and all three of them are the same, but when I do an add record, it calls the form and sends 2, 3 parameters. The 3 parameters is what you have to put in here now. So what we do here is we use the same parameters on every form. My data is manager customer. Okay. I'm sorry, customer manager, not manager customer, customer manager. And then my record is customer. And then we've got the in action type. Okay. I use arguments, so usually mine is ARG, but you can go either direction with it. Once I'm done with that, okay, now I've got everything, so what do I need to do next? Well, there's a couple things. We're going to go ahead and fill out the screen first. We need this, we'll be able to do that, and we need to fill out the screen to say what we need to do with it. A lot of times I do not allow them to resize a form. So I will take off the remember size and the resizable off of this because I just, you know, once it's built, I don't want them resizing the form every time I turn around because it'll get to be a mess. So now I can start putting in controls on the screen. Now there's 2 ways to do it. You can go ahead and do it this way, right mouse click, go into it and say, okay, that's EDT name, and assign the link to it to be in the variables, my record, name. Because that's what you're working with. You're working with a single record. You're working with that my record. So once I do that, now this right here is now the customer name, or I just put name there. The other way to do it, if you've gone through the analysis and done this, is you can literally drag these out and put them on the screen. Now, the difference between them is you have to go in and reassign the each one of those controls to the link of the class, not the link of the analysis. They haven't quite got to the point yet where you can go to the class, which is my druthers, and I keep putting this in, to open up the members here and basically highlight them and drag them over in drops, and they would check to see whether they need to make a string or a number or whatever it may be. But to me, it'd be a lot easier if we do it that way. But in the meantime, I'm going to go into the address. I'm going to go to the link, and you'll notice that it has the analysis up here. I'll just minimize that, come down to my record, and go to the address. I'm going to go to the city, and you can usually do this about 4 or 5 at a time if you want to. So I'm going to go into city. I'm going to get that. Sorry, I got that wrong. Go ahead and here to the link, my variables, my record, city. We go into state. And we go down to variables, my record, state. And then we go into the zip code. And the same thing, my variables, my record, zip code. Okay? Once those done, you know, I've got the form fields in here. What do I have to add? Well, now I have to go back and get that save and cancel form buttons, because we need to be able to save or cancel the save if we don't want to do it. So I've done this, put that on there, and we got a very simple one to put here as well. So we're going to go into, we're going to change the description, then we'll go into the code, and I name these control. Hit F2, and you have the global declarations there. I go back to my code snippets, and I look for the save cancel code, which is right here. I'm sorry, right there. And I'm going to put it here. Now, if you notice, most everything is correct. My data, my record, my record. If you have that pop up on yours, you don't need to do anything more. You're done with that. So we're going to save this and say, okay, that's all we need to do. Back here on the main, oh, I'm sorry, there was one other thing we have to do to the form customer, and I apologize for that. We got to tell it what action we're doing. Once you put on that control, we need to tell it what are we trying to do with this record. So we do in the control save cancel dot sc action type equals my arg action type. Now that's telling the control, the save cancel control, what that is doing. If you get in here and you're building your own and all of a sudden I keep entering the record but nothing is being added, 9 times out of 10 you forgot this. Okay. Later on we're going to get into building some additional deals here. We'll make a form template. And when we make the form template, you'll find out it's a whole lot easier because you just put in the code you already have. The second thing that we do here is we got to do a source to screen. And the reason why we got to do that is if it's an update, we want to be able to fill in the values. We want to make sure that it has the naming and everything with it, okay? So now we've got everything in the form customer, and that's the only code that you have to add. Everything else is going to get handled from here. Okay, so let's get started. Let's add a record, and then we'll be done with this session. And we'll move on and start looking at what we're going to do next time. Hit the go button. We got our little screen up. Hit the add. And 803. And we hit the save button. As you can see, there we go. We're done. And it's highlighted the record. It's as simple as that. How many lines of code did we actually write? I think we got around 5 or 6 or maybe 10 lines of code, and we're done with complete list box and form. We can check that out right here. Now, the only thing about this is it's going to look at there that we got 1,500 lines of code because it's counting all the class codes and stuff too. So we don't need to do much more than that. But the main is all done. Here's the other thing that we need to do with this. When we edit a record, we need to be able to pull that record back. And if you remember right, we went into the table description and we set the content to pull back that record. We need to also go to the embed point within the table, which is selecting a row, and we need to get that row. Here again, I go right back to the code snippets that we have, and I'm going to go to this table select code. Drag it out, drop it here. It's going to ask what the table name is. And what's the record class? Well, that's going to be rec customer. We're done. So now we've assigned that. So now in order to edit that record, I can just simply go hit go again. It'll show my record. I've got it highlighted. I hit the change button, and you notice that all of the information is here. We're done. Okay? And the changes have been made. Here's my thoughts of something that you should do with this. Go ahead and download this out of our SCM. If you need to get a deal on that, refer back to our previous how to get things out of our SCM, our common SCM, and take a look at it and walk it through step by step in debug. So when you go to an ad, you can click the button here. Oh, I'm sorry. I need to kill the test. It's on the wrong screen. You can click the button here, go to code, and I can we got the wrong. I got the whole thing. I need just the button. There we go. And I can override the code control and hit F2 and go in there and put a break right here. When I put that break right there, I've got to use underneath the deal of stepping into the code, because that way it goes into the ad record and you can look at the values as it goes through everything. Same thing with the save and cancel. You know, override the save, hold it, you know, do it there, do the step into code, step through all the code, and you'll see what all it does. It's fairly simple once you realize that it's doing nothing hardly different than what you would have to code by hand of reset customer, add add customer, checking the errors, things like this. It's just doing it for you, okay? And I don't have to write as much code, and especially if you get in something like I've got 600-700 files in one system, and we got several databases that have well into the 200 tables and things like this. It's a whole lot easier to do this than to write that add code 200 times or more. So what are we going to do next? Well, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add a child table to this, okay? So that way you have customer and contacts. I think that's probably what we'll end up doing. So we'll have customer and contacts on this, and we'll still leave that Hyperfile Classic, so that way you can see how the automated child stuff works, which is going to be very nice. Then we'll get into translating your Hyperfile Classic to, we'll go Hyperfile SQL and show the difference in that. So that way, if you're using Hyperfile SQL, you've got it set. We'll go through the same procedures, see how that works, and show you there's really not a whole lot of difference between the two. Then we'll step off and go to the next one, which we'll put it into make a choice. I don't know. We're going to put it into Postgres, so that way we can move forward and show you a lot of other things that you can do with the SQL and things like that you can work with. Okay. Thank you for your time this morning. Hope you all enjoy this. If you have any questions, feel free to holler. That's what we're here for. Be good or be good at it. We will talk to you later.